Welcome to Bat Therapy, mental health through the lens of comics and film. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We're your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources. All right, so today we actually have a really exciting guest who is bringing a very different perspective that I'm jazzed about. So we have Jacob Ward, who is a journalist with a background in technology journalism and behavioral science. He loves exploring how the digital world shapes our minds. So among his experience, it includes 6 years as technology correspondent for NBC News and hosting Hacking Your Mind, a National Science Foundation-funded PBS documentary series. So that series actually looked at the psychological roots of some of our biggest social movements. He recently wrote the book, The Loop, How AI is Creating a World Without Choices and How to Fight Back, and currently hosts his weekly podcast, The Rip Current. And this is about invisible forces driving tech, money, and politics. So today we thought we would talk about Tony Stark. So you actually, in our back and forth, you had mentioned how Tony Stark to you is like an archetype for tech, like the tech bro nightmare. So definitely interested in hearing your thoughts on this and just talking about like the psychological perspective on all that.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Keaton. Hi, Amelia. I really appreciate you having me here. Yeah, when you guys, when we started talking about this, I was trying to think, okay, geez, what is this sort of thing? And Tony Stark was the first thing that really leapt into my mind because it is a category of sort of mythological figure that really captivates a certain kind of person here in the Silicon Valley, where I'm based. I'm in the Bay Area of California. There's this kind of, he's a brash, rule breaker with, unorthodox personal life and a genius that goes so far beyond mere mortals that he's not constrained by their rules and their norms, and is constantly, being sort of, excoriated by some senator or some protester about the, the corners he's cut or how, dangerous what he's built has been. And so there's that sort of like general vibe around him that feels very of a piece with the kinds of people that I find rise in the world of Silicon Valley and are rewarded for those are the tendencies they are often rewarded for. That kind of the founders of Uber sort of famously just blowing ahead and releasing these, amateur drivers in place of taxi drivers without getting anybody's permission. And that sort of asking for forgiveness rather than permission is a hallmark of this industry. That is certainly what we're seeing with AI, right? Which is grabbing up, historical figures' likenesses and the writings of some of our literary greats and regurgitating them as a product without asking anybody's permission in advance. So there's that thing. Then there's also a sort of a subtler twist to Tony Stark's whole shtick that also reminds me of it, which is that he's someone who began his career as a weapons maker, right? And Stark Industries is this, weapons manufacturer that'll sell sort of to anyone. And then his origin story has to do with, the moral debt he owes for all of this death and destruction he's made possible coming due. And he then becomes transformed by his personal conviction that he was sort of making the wrong kind of technology. And now he's going to, make a better kind.
And like the interesting thing with him, though, too, is like he does have that transition, but he doesn't fully learn the lesson that you started off with, right? I mean, he's still creating all of these giant technological, marvels. It's amazing what he's doing, but myself coming from like a healthcare profession, I just can't help but say, okay, but how does that affect the individual people? And how it's like the Frankenstein kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
where it's
well,
like,
that's right.
Just because you can create and do
within science or technology and whatnot, it seems like for him, he understands certain moral things, but he does
But
not slow down.
He still wears the big red suit and shoots missiles at bad guys, right? He's not walking away from the weapons business. He's just wearing, he just happens to wear it himself, is sort of is the way he gets there. The other character that sort of is in this same ballpark is Adrian Veidt from Watchmen. If you're into Watchmen.
Yes, Ozymandias.
Loves him.
Yeah,
that's such an interesting character.
Such a good character. And it's that same idea, right? That he's going to create this better world through this deep media manipulation and ultimately deeply violent sort of act. But that, there's this term in Silicon Valley called accelerationism, the idea that if you just take all the rules away and let market forces in society just accelerate and the technologies just accelerate as much as it can, then it will somehow burn out the problems and we'll get to this utopian future. That is a very Adrian Veidt kind of idea.
I've never understood that theory. It's just one of these things where it's like, haven't you watched movies? Haven't you looked at nature? I mean, even in evolution, have you
ever talked to a European? You ever talked to anybody from Europe? It is
very interesting, especially here in America. It's like that fast and loose and don't put limits on it and let someone just go whole hog into something.
Yeah.
And I mean, the two characters you're talking about, they're at least in some ways Tony Stark, it shifts over time, but like you're talking about, they're trying to better the world. They're trying to do something good. I think Civil War is a great example of a storyline that helps Tony Stark question some of that a little bit, but not everyone is coming even from that background. A lot of people might be coming from, I want to create it just to see if I can, or I want to make money, or I want power or prestige or whatever it might be. And without those constraints, I mean, at least in the characters we're talking about, they're hoping for a better world. But even in those circumstances, really dire things can happen.
And on top of that, too, you have specifically Adrian Veidt and Tony Stark are not only coming from very, very different socioeconomic backgrounds than the average person. They also personally consider themselves far, far smarter and above and elite over the average person. So when they do things, they think, oh, I don't need to ask permission because I'm smarter than you anyway, right? Like I feel like they view humans the way we might view a toddler, where it's like, I don't need to ask this toddler about it because I know more than this toddler does. I'm the one that works the knobs on the stove.
That's right.
They can just stay in the living room.
I mean, it's so funny. So when I was launching my podcast, The Rip Current, one of the first thoughts I had for what I might call it, because I thought it was going to be a little more sort of billionaire specifically focused, was calling it NPC, which is a term that you hear a lot in Silicon Valley, right? So in video games, non-player character, NPC, is the background actors of video games, right? It's the people who don't have a role in the plot other than to just speak some lines and maybe get run over by your car.
Right.
And NPC is a term you actually hear from people in Silicon Valley about the hierarchy typically in an organization of who's an agent and who's an NPC. No, it's a real thing. It's a real
offensive
thing. It's really offensive, right? But it has to do with there are people who count because they have the power to move the plot forward, and there are the people who don't. I mean, I have a friend who says that a lot of the leadership of Silicon Valley, to him, he says it's like the friend who watched Akira too many times and didn't quite get it. Didn't quite understand that it's not about how cool the powers are.
Right.
It's about how corrupting they are.
Yes.
Right. And they watched it and didn't quite understand the takeaway. And I feel like, I mean, we see this again and again with I mean, I'll just say, just not to get us into a tangent here, but I can't tell you how often science fiction or comic books are in some form the inspiration for a product launch name or some sort of thing. And it always belies this total misunderstanding of what that movie was about. So one of them, the hilarious one to me is, so when Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, creator of ChatGPT, got up on stage with Larry Ellison of Oracle and a guy named Masayoshi Son, who's a big investor out of Japan. They all came together with President Trump in the White House to announce this big infrastructure investment that they were going to be making in AI data centers to help the United States be competitive. And it was sort of this big brouhaha. And when it was time to announce what the name of the thing was, they said that it was going to be called Stargate. That's the name of the program, is Stargate, right? So you sort of, when I was like, Stargate, and I was looking back at the plot of Stargate and the whole thing about Stargate, right? At first blush, if you don't know anything really, if you weren't really a fan, if you didn't watch it, you might think, oh, okay, Stargate, right? You're extremely sophisticated extraterrestrial technology makes it possible to move from one planet to another without the trouble of space flight. It's an accelerating technology. How amazing. Okay, I could see in the branding meeting getting that far and everyone being like, great idea. But what they clearly didn't have was someone at the table to say, hey, I've actually watched a lot of Stargate, and let me just tell you what the takeaway is, though, which is that it turns out that the Stargates all turn out to be an instrument of slavery from this this incredibly irritating superior extraterrestrial race that uses them to grab slave labor all over the universe. And it's the whole basis of why we have to be freedom fighters fighting against extraterrestrials is that Stargate is like this, are literally like slave ships.
Or worse, someone did bring that up and they went,
yeah, well, that may be, well, whatever. People don't know that, right? Or whatever it is. It's just it's like whether it's that or stealing Scarlett Johansson's voice from her for the chatbot, which again, that was another one where you're like, did you see that movie? That movie's not about how cool that is. That movie's about loneliness. Right. Yeah, so there's a real misapprehension of the lessons of this stuff that I think is common.
And I think there's such a runaway with a lot of this stuff too, that we're not thinking about the repercussions. So, when you're the way, it's so funny because the way that you're describing these things is such a foreign concept to me. So I come from mental health work. I specifically come from severe and persistent mental illness. You're working a lot with underrepresented, misunderstood folks. A lot of it is about bringing all of the voices to the table and not underestimating people and trying to create more of a communal sense of things. And so there are all these things that just feel so different to me. And, one of the things that is just so scary, I think, for me when it comes to a lot of this technology is just not looking at the ripples. And really just jumping ahead and saying, hey, we met and we came up with this thing and we're gung-ho about it. But I mean, you were just mentioning, oh, hey, we're using this person's voice and we're connecting people. We're doing this, that, and the other. But, if you have a self-driving car that goes out there, it could run people over. If you put chatbots out there, it can actually talk people into being more likely to die by suicide. What they're also seeing is, because of the nature of a lot of social media and chatbots and whatnot, it doesn't actually going on. And like you said, it's actually a bit horrifying to me that it's like, hey, these are the only voices that matter because it's such limited voices.
It is true. And I don't want to over generalize, it's not a monolith. There's many, many kinds of people, but I have seen a number of people at the top of these companies who clearly have that attitude. And, one thing that even the best intentioned people in this industry sometimes fall into is this. So there's this assumption that when you build software, that scale will solve your problems, so that the more copies of a piece of software are out there, then the more chances you'll have to find the bugs and fix the bugs and ship an update, right? And what we're learning, I think, about something like AI is that I don't think it is like software. I think it's more like hardware, where when you ship more and more of a thing with a mistake in it, it actually compounds your problems. It doesn't make them better. And one of the examples of this is in what you're talking about here, Amelia, is, right, so on Monday, OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, released a big report on the mental health effects of the ChatGPT bot, and they showed some specific numbers, and they show that 0.15% of users are developing an excessive emotional attachment. 5%, another 0.15% are clearly showing signs of psychosis and mania, and then I think it's something like 0.07% are are openly discussing suicide with a chatbot, right? Now, on the one hand, you could look at that and think, well, that's, less than 1%. No, what's the big deal? Well, 800 million people use ChatGPT every week. So 0.15% of that is 1.2 million people developing a psychotic attachment to this thing, right? 0.07%, that's that's 500,000 people openly talking about suicide. Now, if we think, oh, okay, well, that's just a reflection of society as a whole, okay, but this isn't society. This is a chatbot impersonating a friend or a therapist or a counselor, or a
Some of
parental
them even
figure.
lying to do so.
Well, like openly lying to do so, right? A thing that's designed to constantly keep the conversation going and to constantly reward your ideas with a 2 thumbs up kind of sycophantic attitude. So there's this sort of assumption on the part of the makers of these companies that the big thing you hear is that there's a utopia coming, and so it's worth short-term job loss or, some mental health crises we're going to have to solve or whatever it is. There's some short-term discomfort, they say. So that's very Starkian, Weitian kind of thing.
In fairness to Tony Stark,
yeah,
when he creates AI, he doesn't create it to lie to him.
That's right. That's
He
right.
He wants more someone he can bounce ideas off of and think things through. And so in fairness to Tony Stark, I feel like he would maybe create something that maybe caused a little bit less issue than what we have going on right now.
So I feel like what Tony screwed up on was the GPT prompt, right? When he made Ultron, he said, "Hey, give me a program that will protect Earth," right? That's the wrong prompt.
Yeah.
He made a program that would successfully protect Earth, but unfortunately that program was like, easiest way to protect Earth, get rid of humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus, hey, let me take a look at this prompt and say, hey, what's the best? Give me a program that will protect humanity. And he went ahead, locked it in, and created the thing off of the wrong prompt.
That's a really good point.
Like we have ChatGPT that says, hey, that's not what I was talking about. Let's go back. I'm going to type this again.
Right.
But
the famous version of this is the paperclip problem, which in AI circles is the problem people have talked about where if you make a machine that's optimized to make as many paperclips as possible, it'll eventually kill all of humanity to be able to maximize paperclip production, right? And there are the other example, like one of the things that one of the things that I think about a lot is this the fact that these companies are building a thing that is supposed to in some way kind of enshrine human values, right? They believe that there is a prompt you could somehow enter into this system that would reflect our values, when the three of us, if we really got into it, probably couldn't agree on what our values are, right? There's no two humans on earth, I think, who could really come together on that subject. And as a result, you wind up in these weird situations like, so one other thought experiment that they were thinking about in the early days of OpenAI was something that one of the researchers there told me was called the heroin problem. And that this problem is you're supposed to make an Ultron for somebody, right? Or you're supposed to make a sort of perfect personal AI assistant, but you're addicted to heroin. So what is it supposed to do? Is it supposed to get you off of heroin, right? Is that its objective function? Or is it supposed to somehow facilitate your addiction, to schedule things so you won't be junk sick when the appointment happens, and to
do like a harm reduction,
get you well, or just get you the best possible deal on the best possible heroin, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what's it for? What is this thing for? Are we trying to make people better, or are we trying to facilitate their instincts? And this is the problem that I think we're going to be facing with this stuff, is that not only are there going to be all of these weird harms, but if you imagine, like if you cast your mind back to like 1957 and you asked a smoker back then, do you want to quit cigarettes? they'd be like, hell no, I don't. I love smoking. It's the pause that refreshes. These are delicious, right? You can't trust the human brain to always know what's healthy. And this is the thing that's going to happen with this stuff. People are going to be caught in these filter bubbles. They're going to be endlessly, flattered and sexualized and all this stuff by these weird chatbot interactions. And if you ask them, hey, would you like me to introduce a little friction into this so that you're not stuck on this thing all day? They're going to be like, no, this feels great.
So that's one of the things so you actually might have already been aware of this because of what you look into, but the American Psychological Association has actually gone to the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee multiple times in terms of concerns. So in 2023, I'm looking at social media. And yes, actually, I think it was just last month.
I quote that guy, APA head, the chief science officer, Mitch Prinstein or something like that. He goes and testifies. I quote that testimony all the time because it's so damning. It's so damning.
Oh God, I was reading it. I was just like, oh no, it's all in one place. It's so terrifying.
Well, it's so nice because people don't like to come down with both feet on the idea that we know that this thing is having an effect on kids or whatever. But he does a great job of saying, here's what we know. And it's very, very clear.
Yes. And pointing out how there are these really important developmental stages, particularly in adolescence, where we are really focused on the social component of life. And who isn't going to just be pulled into something that is constantly positive and reaffirming you?
Yeah, right.
But that's not actually how you learn. The friction, the conflict is actually an important part of development. And so what is that going to be leading to for all of these kids? It's like a huge question mark.
I was just talking to a group of mediators, professional mediators, and they were talking about how concerned they are about the coming generation of kids who've been raised, let's say young men and women, raised to use a chatbot as a kind of like sexual companion, right? Which is a big thing that is happening now, right? If I was 13 and I had a sort of porny girlfriend potential chatbot interaction available to me, I would absolutely be playing around with that, right? Like, of course you would. So, but you do that for a few years during your most crucial developmental phase. And are you still going to be able to form an attachment to a real breathing person who isn't constantly sexually available to you and constantly telling you how awesome you are? Like, the difficulty of making an attachment to somebody is going to be so much greater. And so
absolutely,
I do worry a lot about that. Keaton, can I ask you a question? I wonder if you've heard this term that's been going around, because this is sort of trying to transition us to a little bit of good news, which is that, there's a lot of trouble obviously with kids using this stuff. But I will say, I just heard a term the other day that I just love and that makes me feel a little better about the future. And it's a derogatory term that kids, at least here in California, are using to refer to both AI and to adults who rely on it too much. They call them clankers. Don't be a clanker.
Yeah.
Have your kids been using that at school?
Yeah, has anybody
Keaton?
in your world used that?
I have heard it used a couple of times, especially because I teach at a virtual school. And so everything we do is online, and all of my classes, I'm trying to constantly get them to interact with each other as much as possible. And it was one of those things at the beginning of this year, I told them all about the dead internet theory, which was something that I never thought was possible back in
remind us what that is.
2005. So the dead internet theory basically says we're going to get to a point where the internet will have so many bots and so much AI that humans will never actually be interacting with each other online. It will all be, it'll all be just communication with AI or with a chat bot in some way, and no actual human interaction.
My bot hires your bot, and your bot dates her bot, and that's right. Wow.
Yeah. And so I tell them about that because, I mean, it's really difficult at this stage to try and tell a student not to use ChatGPT. Like, at this point, it's like, it's out there. The only thing we can do is just kind of guide it. It kind of reminds me of like the Hulk in the first Avengers movie. It's like, he's a great asset as long as he's pointed in the right direction, right? And it's out there now. It's not one of those things where we can just pull it back and say, no AI allowed, because we can't really control it. All we can do is say, hey, how can we use this to continue actually learning?
Yeah.
it ends up being all about discussion and making sure that you're talking with another person, making sure that you're sharing ideas and not just facts, right? And that's the thing about AI. AI, they can't code ethics. They can't code ethics. And the example I always give students, I'm like, okay, the tolerance intolerance problem, right? Okay, you can be tolerant, but is it still tolerant to accept intolerance, right? That's not something you can really teach AI. You can teach AI to answer that question, right? But you can't teach it to catch it in the act. And that's one thing that I try and just tell students, hey, listen, this is a great tool. The same way that a car is great from getting from point A to point B the fastest. This will help you get from point A to point B the fastest. But what did you learn in between it?
You still got to go to the gym sometimes.
Right. We're teaching, I basically have to teach students now the value of being able to think for yourself. That is the number one thing that you're being taught, because there's no need to ask them, hey, what year did Abraham Lincoln get assassinated? They can Google that. The internet changed everything, right? When we were in school, it was like, hey, you need to know how to do this math because you're not always going to have a calculator. Joke's on you.
Yeah, right.
I have a graphing calculator on my phone. I can ask Siri any question I want and it'll spit the answer right out, right?
Yeah.
Quadratic formula, don't need to memorize it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of education now is, okay, yes, we're in the classroom. AI is available. When to use it and when to not use it. And the answer simply becomes, whatever we're learning, we need to turn it into a discussion in some way or form that's asking you to think for yourself and not just type something into Chat GPT. And you have to be super aware of that and make it very, very purposeful to make sure you're not doing that. Because it's easy to slip into it as a teacher too. As a teacher, it's way easy, didn't get my lesson plan together. ChatGPT, give me a lesson I can teach these students,
I mean,
right?
I wrote a freaking book about how we shouldn't be using this stuff. And I'll ask it things like, I'll ask it all kinds of ridiculous things because I don't want to have to think about it. I mean, this is the thing.
And I'm the fool over here being doing it on my own.
Keep going, Amelia. Keep going. Do it for all of us.
Fight the good fight.
Do it for all of us. I mean, absolutely. I know.
Used to use it, yeah.
No, it's good. It's good. I think that's fantastic. I was just talking to somebody the other day who was, I was in the kitchen of somebody's house at a dinner party, and there was a guy there lamenting that his college-bound daughter doesn't want to be a lawyer or an engineer. She wants to be an artist. And he was sort of, panicking about her job prospect. And I said to him, I don't know, man, have you seen what's going on with lawyers and engineers? I mean, your entry-level law and engineering jobs is the equivalent of the graphing calculator, right? AI is going to be to those things what a graphing calculator used to be to your ability to do arithmetic. So, and I was thinking to myself, if your daughter actually were to learn, were to really study art as a creative and intellectual discipline, and could become a disciplined and prolific creative person, I wonder if that's not the most AI-proof thing out there. I think that being able to come up with truly funny, truly inspiring, truly beautiful things is going to be the sort of last really valuable human skill that isn't going to be taken away by this. There's going to be versions of it that are taken away, no question, right? We're going to be listening to all kinds of AI music within 6 months. But I just think there might be something about, which is part of why I'm drawn to you guys' show, right? Is that thinking through what fiction, what comics, what movies can teach us about our lives is there's something powerful about that for humans that I hope people can maybe start to prioritize once we're all sick of all this AI slop that's about to be poured all over us, Well,
and I think too that art and creativity and all of that you're talking about is a really important mirror for all of this. I mean, we've already talked about science fiction from a few different angles. I mean, science fiction's been warning us about this for a long time.
They've tried, right? They really tried.
They tried. And
They
and
really
so
did.
it's a great way of looking at what might happen, helping us introspect, but also, I mean, there's representation issues all around, including there. But I keep thinking back to when we were talking about Tony Stark, Ozymandias, and probably a lot of these folks who are creating these ideas think, I'm so amazing, I'm so smart. You kind of have to do that to take it to a certain level.
Mm,
But even with these high intellect examples, that's not the only important factor. And you're only coming from one perspective. And so I think when it comes to the arts, it's a really great way of trying to really fill in from all directions, all different perspectives. And I think we're going to need those reminders because there are all these ways that technology is forcing our perceptions in certain directions without us
mhm,
knowing it.
mhm.
And it's being based on certain larger representations of people or certain kind of data. And for some reason, we see it as like, oh, if this technology is telling me something, I should value it more than
Yes.
other perspectives. But I think you have something to, I mean, like, there's a lot of struggle going on in the creative realm when it comes to takeover of AI stuff. But I think you have a really great point in terms of like the Tony Starks, the Ozymandias, the, fill in the blank of whoever it might be. That's one perspective of what you need to create these things. But I think that diversification that comes with the artistic mindset is a really great example of something else that you need to make sure you don't pigeonhole yourself and,
Yeah.
to be quite frank, the entire human race.
Totally. I mean, I think one of the big thesis of my book, The Loop, which came out I thought I was like 5 years early, you guys, but it came out like 9 months before ChatGPT did, and then suddenly I was as blindsided as anybody. One of the big theses that I pursued there was, and Amelia, you'll know all about this, right? There's this concept, this two-mind concept that Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist, made famous, right? A system 1 and a system 2, a fast-thinking brain and a slow-thinking brain. And the theory is that the fast-thinking brain is your instinctive, ancient, primitive decision-making autopilot that makes the vast majority of your decisions for you. It's what allows you to, it's going with your gut. It's accidentally driving to the wrong place without being conscious that you were doing it, right? It is this very unconscious decision-making system that we have in common with like primate relatives. It's an ancient, millions of years old kind of system. Then your slow-thinking brain, that is, the higher human consciousness. That's creativity, that's rationality and caution and all of these things that we consider to be sort of what makes us human. And that ancient system is, if you think of it as software, is like absolutely foolproof, like a rock solid operating system that has been debugged for a long time, right? Whereas our creativity, our caution, our rationality, that stuff is really only probably 200,000 years old at the oldest. That's like brand new glitchy software, right? That we have just started to figure out. And just as we're getting good at it, right? And the enlightenment happens and we're able to like develop our abilities as higher functioning sentient beings, along comes this system that my thesis is going to incentivize companies that want to make money off us to drive us back toward, and this has always been true, right? But drive us back toward being this ancient, instinct-driven version of ourselves and away from the cautious, creative, rational part. Because if you want to sell something to somebody, you don't want to sell it to a cautious and creative and rational person. You want to sell it to a guy who can't help but, look at cleavage. You know what I mean? Like it's that kind of thing that is going to always work better for people who are trying to manipulate your choices. So to your point, Amelia, like we have come so far in this. Something like creativity is so special and fragile and new. We really can't be screwing around with that. We really can't be kicking that around like a soccer ball, or treating it as disposable or endless, because it's not. And so I really like the idea. I'm trying these days not to be as much about like, I'm trying not to be alarmist because I think it prompts kind of the wrong reaction in people, although I am alarmed. I'm trying to instead promote the idea like we've got really special magical stuff that makes us human, and we got to protect that stuff. Let's do that together, and I don't know quite how Keaton, I'm not sure how you're supposed to do that in the classroom, but that's the thing I'm hoping to try and do more
Keaton's
of.
on the front lines for this sort of thing.
Yeah, man.
Well, honestly, I think it's really one of those things where you have to teach students that it's human to be told no. It's human to not get what you want. And that's not something that AI does a good job at, right? AI is not very good at saying no. Whatever you type it's going to give you some form of answer that you probably will want to hear. But it's kind of teaching them like, okay, what do you like? Oh, I like this thing. What do you like? I like that thing. Okay, I'm going to give that a try. Okay, I'm going to try that as well, right? You're not going to get an actual opinion from artificial intelligence, right? You can go to artificial AI and say, hey, who should I vote for?
Absolutely.
Right?
And here's the crazy part is so there's a famous study. We were talking about this fast thinking brain, slow thinking brain, right? And that the slow thinking brain, not only is that sort of what we imagine is the better version of ourselves, but we also vastly overestimate how often we use it. Like as humans, we just are always assuming that we're using our fast thinking brain. Our slow thinking brain. Well, there was a very famous and amazing study in which they flashed in front of people a bunch of images of faces in pairs and said, which face do you prefer? And invariably, the sort of slightly more symmetrical and attractive face would win out. It's happening way too fast for anybody to be like, I don't know, who is that guy? There's no names, there's nothing else going on. Turns out those were all candidates in state house races across the country. And the people who won on instinct from this study statistically were way more likely to have won in real life, right? And it maps onto, and so the thing is and this is true when it comes to the tribalism of politics and the rest of it, but that's our ancient system making our choices for us. We like to think that we're using this system, but we're nowhere near as often as we would like to. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you got me excited about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where I always reiterate to them, like, listen, you are in the most advanced technological age where we're really hitting on things that we didn't think were going to be possible versus, I mean, I'm a millennial and I remember what the phone sounded like when you left it off the hook for too long, right? I remember corded phones. I remember the first cell phone my mom got was inside of a bag and it would kill your car battery hooking it to the cigarette lighter, right? Like that's the age that I started. And from then to 30 years later, it's a completely different world. It's completely different versus them. They were born in this current world, right? It's still constantly shifting, but at the same time, it's like back then, it was harder for us to have access to stuff at too early of an age. Now, it's one of those things. It's like, it's impossible. It's impossible. So what does that mean as far as how fast now they're forced to grow up? Because it used to be for us, rated R meant something. I'm not even able to see that until I'm 17, right? Now they just go on YouTube and say they were born in 1970. Right?
That's right.
And so it's a very, very different world we live in. And it's one of those things where I don't want them to be afraid of it, but I want them to think it through, right? Like don't be John Hammond. Yes, you can create dinosaurs, but really think about if you should do it. Think about the ramifications of it. Think about what it means, because it's kind of like Jacob, what you were talking about with a lot of these guys that are like seriously into the tech business. They pulled the trigger on things without thinking about the ramifications of it later, and that's whether it's from a financial perspective or, Amelia, like you were talking about before, a Victor Frankenstein perspective. Like, is it possible to do this?
Yeah, the Jurassic Park example, I think, is another really great one where,
Yep. Right.
well, and so, once again, like it's interesting to me where there's infrastructure for things and where there's not. So, like for me, there's a review board where you have to go through to do research with people, but there's no such review board for these
No.
types of things that we're talking about, and it's like viewed in a different way, and yet, arguably, if anything, there should be a review board that's more like worldwide instead of just, your community specific, because of how far reaching some of these things have become.
Yep.
And once again, it's created by these small groups of people. And well-meaning or not, if it expands far beyond that group of people, you can't predict fully what's going to happen.
No, that's right.
And
There's
it's just
a
kind of released out there.
Yeah, there's a example that just came out recently. A study was made about bias around caste in India. So caste, for anybody who doesn't know, is this religious concept in Hinduism that when you behave well in one life, you will come back, be reincarnated higher up the social order. And people of different castes in the past have suffered terrible discrimination. The British, when they were colonizing India, would use this to try and sort of keep everybody kind of divided and distracted. And they've made huge gains in India fighting back against it and making it illegal to discriminate on the basis of caste. Okay, well, you introduce suddenly this Western-built LLM system, these chatbots that come out of the West and are trained entirely just on like the writings of the internet, right? The wisdom of the crowd. Well, it turns out that they have huge caste bias, and that's what people in India are discovering, is that like you ask it, which of these two people of different castes should get a job, and it will always choose the higher caste person. It's just this really, it's like all of the other forms of racism and sexism and ageism and everything else that you see, but it's this whole other one that clearly nobody thought about going into this.
And because it's coming from a computer, we think, oh, no, the bias isn't there, but it's based off of our bias. It's written through our bias.
That's right. And this is the thing, is that the anthropomorphic tendencies of the human brain, right? To say, this system I don't understand must be much smarter than me, so I should trust its choices, is the essence of the AI moment.
Well, and that even is true with the tech bro kind of thing too, right? So there's this sense of, okay, so if a person is able to get to a certain point of success and these things are widespread, they must be a Tony Stark. They must be an Ozymandias. They must be something above the rest of us.
Yeah, they must be qualified not just to be a billionaire, but to be like an elder statesman or the president of the United States or whatever else it is. That's right.
Exactly. But then if you talk to people who have interacted with these folks personally, or you talk to people who have worked at these businesses, they'll tell you, no, it's just like everywhere else. There's nothing special here. We have the same issues that, these other systems have, or, we have all these inefficiencies that our business. And so that same kind of thing happens with the creators of these things as well, that I think helps perpetuate it forward.
Yeah. Thinking, Keaton, about what you were saying about, the sort of I'm thinking, you have me thinking about the incentive structure for kids. I'm sort of having this thought as I say it out loud. Like there is, kids are so reward primed, right? Whether it's the social reward or social punishment, right? They're so, I've got a 14-year-old and 12-year-old. My 14-year-old, right, would do absolutely anything to avoid embarrassment, right? Embarrassment is the number one nightmare, right? And
Cringe.
I just think, cringe, right, is the worst thing ever. Exactly. Yep. And I'm just trying to think, like, I want there to be a way for us to harness that, which is part of why I like the clanker thing, right? Like I like that there's a term of embarrassment around using AI, right? Too much or whatever. Like, and the problem right now, like I was once talking to a high school senior who I was asking him about ChatGPT and whether, he uses it on his homework and whether other people he knows uses it, and everybody he knows uses it, and everybody sort of considers it cheating, but is using it anyway. This kid was the valedictorian. And he's like, you guys taught us that school is all about getting a Tesla and a house. And so why wouldn't we just take the shortest possible route to get those things? It's an exchange of money. It's not about me. It's about, my status in life, basically. And I just want there to be, I don't know what to do with this, but it just feels to me like I want to harness the incentives rather than just trying to say to people, you should do this because this is good for you, because nobody does that. I want them to be like, do this because it makes you cool, or do this because it'll make you rich, or I don't know what it is, but like we need to harness that in this somehow.
Well, I think what it is, and this is something I was talking to students about too, it is the thing about AI is it is still a reflection of modern society, right? So for example, let's say ChatGPT came out back in 1991, right? And you asked it about the LGBTQ community. It would probably have some very awful things to say, right? If it came out in the 1850s, right?
Right.
And you asked it about African Americans, it would probably have some awful things to say. And so because it's artificial intelligence and it's pulling from what is out there, it's a reflection of society. And because of that, I think the only thing that we can really do is teach the pride of individuality and how important it is that you're different. One of the things I always tell my students at the very beginning of the school year, I said, you're only as smart as where you're standing on the planet. And I tell them, in this classroom, in this Zoom that we're in right now, I can guarantee you, I probably know more about science than any of you in here. That's my background. I've been doing it for a long time. I said, I've never played Minecraft once in my life. If you put me in Minecraft, I'd be completely lost. I would not know what to do. I would not know what button to press. But you do. Some of you are experts at it. Some of you are experts at Pokemon cards. Some of you are experts at Roblox, whatever it is. And that's also just as important as me being your science teacher. And I think that's the only way that we can kind of, as the students say, brain rot at bay, is teaching them the value of individualism. Like, it's okay for you to be different. Not only is it okay, it's way better if you're different, because at that point, then fine. As a whole, if we take a look at society, at least what AI will be reflecting is all of the differences and not a hive mind, right? Like, I mean, we look at that story all the time in the Bible where it was like, all right, who do you want me to release, Jesus or Barabbas? And in that crowd in particular, they all happen to say Barabbas. They tell that as a story now to be like, wow, how in the hell did this happen? And now we see how it can actually happen, right? And so going back to it, it's like, okay, it is extremely important for you to be your own individual in this world, because if you are relying on AI, it's only going to teach you what it knows.
That's
It's
really
only
cool.
going to tell you what it knows.
You're essentially saying if you want to be able to rely on AI, it has to be able to rely on you to be like a true, genuine version of yourself, which I think is a really cool way of approaching that.
Yes. I mean,
I like that.
the A stands for artificial. It's based on something. It's based on something that feeds into it, right? It's not coming up with its own thought. It's all based on something. And so if it's going to be based on something, it needs to continue to be based on original thoughts and original ideas, because otherwise we're not going to move forward. It's going to get to a point where AI doesn't help us move forward. It's going to put us at a standstill.
Yeah.
So once again, it can't be like just owned and created by one person. It has to be like a community.
That's
Absolutely.
right. That's right. I agree with that.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I know we're getting near the top of the hour, so to speak. If you don't mind, I did have a random curiosity that has nothing to do with our topic.
Go.
So we've never had a journalist join us before, but
I'm
there are
honored.
many comic book journalists. I mean, Clark Kent, obviously.
Yeah, right.
Being a
Peter
big one.
Parker.
Peter
Right.
Parker. You've got
Lois
so many.
Lane,
Lois
Vicky
Lane.
Vale.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So what's your personal opinion based on your own experience on like the representation of journalists in comics?
That's a good one. I like the, there's certainly the accurate representation of it being a kind of dogged and adrenaline junkie type, which is certainly true. I've worked I've worked in almost every major medium, and, the people who do that job well get a huge amount of juice from being witnesses to the action, being right up against the action. So as a rule, we go places that are very, that really make no sense at all, and when you're in the mode of going there as a witness on behalf of your audience, it is a really powerful thing. I've gone and been in front of, I've gone right up to forest fires and been in very scary situations there. I've been tear gassed by the police. I've been, in all these weird situations. I have sitting here, literally here, I can show you. I have a trauma kit that you bring with when you go and cover protests, right? A field trauma kit. This is a gas mask. There's a tourniquet in there. One of the things one of the number one pieces of equipment is this Sharpie, because you need to write the phone number of your assignment desk, of the people that assigned you the story, on your arm for when and if you get arrested, because you won't know, when you need to make your one phone call. So like, it's a total maniac's job a lot of the time. And that is fairly accurately represented, I would say. I mean, the nice thing about being a journalist,
Lois Laney sounding.
yeah, you're just sort of like, you're really trying to get it done. Now, there's another sort of competitive, trying to get the scoop all the time kind of thing that is also true of some very good journalists, I would say. But I like, the nice thing about being a journalist is that some of the qualities, it's been going on for so long, and it's such a sort of norms-based business, sort of profession, that the representation of it, the stereotypes tend to be pretty accurate. The thing I would say I don't love about it is that the representation of who is a journalist tends to also represent what has been classically true, which is that it was such a both low-paying job and such a gate-kept job that only white people ever did that job. And so, the Jimmy Olsens, the Lois Lanes, the Clark Kents, the Peter Parker, they've all got something in common. Right. And it's not just that they're in comics, so like,
there is Iris West.
No, who's that?
She recently they recently changed her to an African American when they did.
Okay, that's cool.
They did New 52, and when they did the Flash television show, they basically changed her from
that's good. I like that.
a white woman, and now she's a black woman. And so
that's one of the main changes we have needed in this world, is a broader diversity of background in people who are going to bear witness to history on behalf of everybody else. So
it's not just the tech world that's overly white. Psychology, we're trying to fix it too. So
it's just how it is. It's just how it's been for so long. So I like that is I would like that to change. But by and large, I would say I don't mind how they portray us.
Yeah. So how realistic is it that you could be Superman and Clark Kent at the same time?
No, man. After a day working that job, you're so tired. Like, there's no way you're going to go out and grab puppies out of burning buildings.
Yeah.
There's no
Even
way
as a
you're
Kryptonian, it's just too much.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think he's going to be, and they don't show him with his drinking problem, which is the other thing that's so common among journalists. So so that would be a weirder comic. I'd watch that. I'd love to see that
would be an interesting,
right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Superman in recovery. That'd be funny.
There you go.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the tech boom the whole time. There's no phone booths anymore for him to go change into.
I know. I don't know where he's going to do it. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah, that's pretty wow. That's a really good point. I hadn't even thought about the fact that there's a lack of color in in journalism portrayed in comic books. But that's a very good point.
Right. The
Well, we're so
guy
used
with
to it.
with the hat and the little press card and everything.
Mhm.
You know, it's always one kind of guy. So that's right.
Well, and that's the danger, right? We're so used to the imbalance of representation that we don't see it most of the
I
time.
mean, this is what all the behavioral scientists will tell you, right? This is the whole essence of bias, is that your brain is just a little bean counter. All it does is just keep the math on how often it sees a thing so it can start to shortcut that thing. And so if the only people you ever encounter working, you know, a newspaper stand are, you know, Indian American, then you're going to assume that's what they always do, right? And this is just true of media representation everywhere. So I think it's super important that stuff change, especially in media that's aimed at young people, because that's when the bean counting really starts to get going. And so the more we can change that, the better.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
You guys,
We've
real
really
pleasure. I
enjoyed
love
it.
your topic and love how you're going about it. So thanks for
Thank
this.
you so much.
Thank you so much.
Definitely want to remind folks to check out both your podcast, the Rip Current. There's some really great information over there. I actually listened to, I think it was a recent one on AI psychosis.
Yeah.
That I thought was really interesting. Also, your book, The Loop, How AI is Creating a World Without Choices and How to Fight Back. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure people knew about you?
No, I really appreciate it. Yeah, the ripcurrent.com is where I keep almost everything. It's easy to find everything I do there. For some reason, my number one following is on TikTok, but I'm trying to be smart and move it over to YouTube because that's a more sustainable business model. But yeah, you can find me on both those platforms. So thanks for that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JBS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.